So I think it worked better without source sheets, but you can all, again, nobody said anything otherwise. So until I hear from you, we'll just continue in that vein. But if you can open a chumash, you can find one online on Safaria. You can have one with you. Or there's probably a million other websites. We are jumping to the end of the parsha, to the Akedah. It is chapter 22. It is Parak Chaf Bet in the book of Breshit. And what we'll do is just take us, before we hit the commentary, I want to lay out the issues, and there are significant issues, and then we'll see how he deals with them. He has a very unique perspective. I'm not sure we can actually buy it, but it's a very fascinating and unique perspective. Okay, everyone has a chumash?
Got it.
Got it. Okay. All right, I'll read the first, let's say, two psukim, because there's really everything we need is in those two psukim, right? Right after the previous piece, Elohim nisat Abraham, and God tests Abraham, right? Vayomer alav Abraham, and he says, right, Vayomer hineni, and Abraham says, I'm here, I'm ready. Vayomer kachna et bincha yechidcha she'ahavta, right? Take your son, your only son, which you loved, at Yitzchak, v'lech lecha el eretz haMoriah, and go to the land of Moriah, v'ha'aleu sham le'olah, right? Offer him there up as a burnt offering, al achad heharim asher amar elechad, on one of the mountains which I will tell you. Right? Read simply, what is that command to Abraham?
To make a korban.
Right. I mean, it's to go and literally
make him a korban.
Make him a korban, to kill your child. Now, what are again? This might be the most theologically difficult section in the entire Chumash.
Yes.
And I say that with no overstatement at all. It really might be, right? What are the issues that we're contending with?
Avram killing his son,
right?
Sacrificing his son.
Abraham killing his son. Now, is that Abraham doing it or Hashem telling him to do it?
Well, to the outside world, it doesn't really make much of a difference.
Hold on 1 second. I'm just going to pop on this. I forgot to put on, when Jeff's not here, I always forget something. Cord? No, it's a cordless speaker. Now you can all hear Mark. Everyone can still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Right. Be more specific. Is it Avram killing his son or Hashem commanding Avram to kill his son?
Seems like Hashem commanding Abraham to kill his son. It's something that hard to understand in terms of.
I think that's an understatement. Yes, that is incredibly difficult to understand. Why? I'm going to push you a little bit further. Why is, I know it sounds like a stupid question, but bear with me for a minute. Why is that difficult to understand?
Well,
we don't endorse child sacrifice.
Right. So number one is we don't endorse child sacrifice, right? We don't, right? We can't imagine that Hashem is telling Avram to kill his own child in some form of religious worship. Is there anything else? Maybe
it's like Molech, all that idol worship that we read about.
That's the same as That's the same as the first one, meaning, right? This is something that's not comprehensible. We know Hashem does not want us to do this. So Mark, yeah.
Continuity of the Jewish people.
Right. So Mark says continuity of the Jewish people. I'll sharpen that just a smidgen with Mark's permission. It's good. Mark, I got a thumbs up, right? Which means Avram has promised him, Ki v'Yitzchak yikarei lecha Zara, maybe Zara. But, right, through Yitzchak, you will have, right, as Mark says, continuity, offspring. The people of Israel continue through Yitzchak. What happens if he kills Yitzchak? Right, not only how we can't comprehend how
end of the line.
He's a liar, right? God's a liar. Good. what do we do with that? Right, that becomes right the $64 million question, because 64,000 is just not enough for that question anymore. Right, but 30, 40 years ago, $64,000 was like a lot of money. Now it's still a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money. The $64 million question. What are you supposed to do with this? Right, so everyone takes their stab. Now, let's add one more piece to the puzzle. Does Abraham at the end of the day go ahead and kill Yitzchak?
No.
No. What do we do with that?
So
Did-
nothing horrendous happened, and that Hashem can still follow through on his promises to.
Well, then if Hashem knew he wasn't going to let him do it, why did he do it in the first place?
To see if he's
He says,
really committed. If he's really committed.
See if he's really committed. So Rabbi Riskin years ago got in a lot of trouble for writing an article that he thought Abraham failed the Akedah. Now, the funny thing is, I can show you a medrash that says that, I'm not going to do it now because he doesn't quote it, but I can show you a medrash that says that Abraham failed the Akedah test.
In what way?
He didn't get it. Either he should have said, God, you're a liar and you're out of your mind, which is a little chutzpah to say to Hashem, but turn to Hashem and say, this is impossible. You told me, right, that Yitzchak's going to be the continuity, as Mark says, and I don't think this is right. Right, so he starts by saying, he does two things. And both of them, one of them is a little bit more traditional than the second. The second is where it gets fascinating. The first thing he says, right, is that I think along the lines that Linda just said, that this is a test to see how far Abraham is willing to go, even if we don't want him to go all the way, and we don't want him to do it. We don't want him to kill his son. Is Abraham willing to put everything that he loves and believes in aside simply because God told him so, right? The language he uses is, and it's an interesting phrase, right? Hanitzachon al atzmo, right? A victory over yourself, right? That's the test. Can you get to a point where you're so committed to Hashem that everything else, your beloved son, your continuity, your family, all those things that mean so much, you can conquer yourself and your wishes and desires and loves and do what Hashem tells you. So that's part of the test.
But those who claim that he failed the test, a passing grade would have been to call Hashem out.
Yes. Now, lest you say that's crazy, he did that by stone.
Yeah.
Right? And the destruction of stone that will, right, that's floating right around in these parshios, right? Hashem says, Abraham, let's go down and let's go destroy stone. And Abraham says, what? Right? Chalila lecha, God forbid. Right? Shofet kol haaretz lo yaseh mishpat. Right? The judge of the world is not going to do justice. Throw that at God now. Yeah. Right? Or there's another medrash, right, that says that he just misunderstood. But either way, yes, he should have challenged God and said, are you crazy? Now, I don't know, it sounds good that we want to say that to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but when faced with kill your child, maybe the proper response should have been no. Now,
but the funny thing is that the Pasuk introduces it as a test.
yes, and
did Abraham know that? I don't know, but the Pasuk tells us that right at the beginning.
He knew what kind of test would it be.
well, even if it's not a test, I mean, God comes to him and says, go and throw your son on an altar, right? It is, you have to respond in some way, and that response, whether we call it a test or response, he had to understand that this was something spectacular or insane, or
Well,
whatever word you want to use.
And the test is I don't know why God is telling me to do this. I don't know what the outcome is going to be. It's a test. I have to do it. The outcome will be fine. I have faith in God. It's going to be okay.
Correct. I mean, that's what he. I think they're right. If you read Kierkegaard's book, that's essentially the Kierkegaardian position. Right? He has a famous book on the Akedah, which is kind of interesting. But that's what he says, right? The test is the nitzachon al atzmo, right? Without doubt, without questioning, you go and you do what Hashem told you. But if that is the case, then why does Hashem stop him? Like, what is that about? Right? It's let's see if he's going to do it, but then I don't really want him to do it. Right? Which then raises the question: maybe he made a mistake the first time doing it, because Hashem says don't do it. Right? That question is actually not as addressed as most people can't get past the primary question, which is, this is Meshiga, right? Meshiga in the head. We can't get past that primary question. But the second question is, why force him to do it if you're going to pull back at the end and have the angel hold his hand?
But isn't there a Rashi or Midrash where I think the Satan says Yishmael, who was 13, had his bris, and he went through pain or whatever, and Yitzchak, who's going to be a very young, what's the big deal for him? So Hashem says, if I tell Yitzchak, Avram, to sacrifice Yitzchak, his whole body, he'll do it. As you know, it's like a dialogue between the Satan and Hashem wants to prove a point.
Right. So, but are you assuming that dialogue happened in history in real time?
Of course not. I'm going with a midrash, like
No, but,
you know,
but so then if we assume that happened, right, that's a very difficult, because it's, part of it's about Yitzchak, but what did Avram do to deserve that?
Yeah.
This is really about Yitzchak. Poor Avram. I mean, that poor guy just got hammered because the Satan came and so those are interesting and probably need a better look than we'll give it tonight, because it's a fascinating midrash, right? Those midrashim are so rich that we should do a shiur just on each of those midrashim. Like, literally, they're very rich, but I think they have to be studied to figure out really what's going on there, because a simple read of that midrash is very, very hard, right? Probably a profound read of that midrash is probably spectacular, but since I didn't prepare that midrash, we're gonna have to. Well, we can take it up a different time. So most people will tell you, yeah, Hashem wanted to see how far Abraham would go, but he didn't really want to kill Yitzchak, which is a good answer. I mean, it's I guess it's as good as answer as any. There is another approach which you won't find in the, certainly not in the Rishonim, which argues as follows, and there are different variations of the approach. I will share with you first with David Tzvi Hoffman's. It's a different way of reading the Chumash, which you have to be okay with. But he says as follows, and it's kind of genius, as hopefully you'll agree with me in a moment. He says that there's no point, just this game of let's see if Abram can do it to tell him not to do it. He's not buying it. He thinks that the command is given to Abraham to teach future generations of Jews that there are times when it actually we will be called upon to sacrifice our own children, and that they should know that that's okay, right? This wasn't the time. Yitzchak had to live, and Yitzchak had to provide the continuity for the Jewish people, but Hashem wanted it on the books that such a command can be given, and such a personality such as Abraham Avinu could actually consider and agree to such a command. Okay, and now, therefore, that's why you need to have this in. It's not really about whether Abraham will do it or not. It is putting in print a command for future generations that this, should the need arise, God forbid, is a commanded and religious act. Yeah.
But it says specifically he's testing Avraham. So it's
Yes.
not like, hey, I'm gonna do this and see what happens, and people should know in the future. That God tested Avraham.
Yeah, so that's why I said in the beginning, so it is, let me take one step back. Mark is 100% right. If Mark did anyone hear, can you hear that through this?
No.
No, we couldn't hear what
All
he
right, so
said.
the speaker, Jeff's gonna have to fix our speaker, but he's not here, so we have to figure this out. Right, Mark says, but it says Hashem tested Abraham, right? So I said right at the beginning that, and many of the theological challenges are so great that not all of the answers read beautifully into the Chumash. But sometimes people will choose a theologically correct answer over a perfect read because the theological challenge are so great. Right? I said, I think this is by far the most challenging command we have in the entire Chumash. But that's how he kind of squares, have the command, but not do it. There's a time for it and a time not for it. Now, how do you decide, right? How do you decide when it is and when it's not?
Is there any support for there's a time when you say this is not the religion I signed up for? Like this is just so beyond anything that, someone who did not believe in idol worship, who walked away from idol worship, who, had started
Are
on
you
a
talking
path.
about for Avram or for us?
I'm talking about for like Avraham and then the future generations, but there's no red line there. There's no.
So again, this is the most, I believe, right, theologically challenging parsha in the entire Chumash. It is incredibly difficult to try and understand, and people rack their heads around, they rack their brains to try and figure out how this could be. This is an incredibly novel interpretation. As Mark notes, it's not so simple to read in the Chumash, but what he does is two things. He tells you why we have to have the command to do it and the angel pulling back, right? And that this is a message for the future and not for us. Now, when right? Anyone thinking of an example when Jews actually had to kill their children?
At the time of the Churban Bias, to eat them. And not they had to, but that's what they did.
Or so
in
that, or it was the kids had died and then they ate them.
Whatever.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I mean, they have all these midrashim about, right, the young men and women going to serve as prostitutes in Rome, and they're jumping overboard, or the parents are throwing them overboard. Right, there are unique times in history where we take such actions. Right, there are in the Holocaust.
Holocaust.
People smothered children, whether intentionally or not intentionally. Again, nobody. Right, those are times.
That's not a religious imperative. That was presumably because they just didn't want to see their children go through that level of suffering. How can you compare that with this?
Everyone else would.
No. So then, Ernest, now comes the question: did those people do right or wrong? That's a hard question.
People who smothered their children.
No. But my understanding.
They shouldn't be found out. They shouldn't all die.
Right, exactly.
The child is crying. They put a hand over the mouth. That
Yes.
story has. That's one of the terrible Holocaust stories, but those are real stories. Those are not fables.
Had they not done that, the child would have died, and everyone else would have also.
Right. So, and they have all these fascinating halachic discussions. At the end of the day, nobody's willing to judge them, but Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman says this is meant to give them solace and comfort. That there are times.
Avram didn't kill Yitzchak in the end. How does it give him solace and comfort? Avram didn't kill Yitzchak.
He was willing to, and he was asked
but he didn't.
But he was willing to, and Hashem commanded it, right? Meaning he doesn't see it as a retreat. Again, I'm not convinced this is shot in the Chumash. and I'm not convinced it's the best answer. It is a fascinating answer. And to respond, though, if I wanted to defend him, the defense would be, no, that's why Hashem commanded it, to show that the command was not a joke. It wasn't a lie, right? Because if we say, well, he just wanted to see what Abraham was going to do, but he didn't really want him to do it, then we're back to then we go, then the round we go, then he shouldn't have commanded it, and maybe Abraham failed.
How do you
Shouldn't have done it if Hashem didn't want him to do it, right? But here, he's setting up this, yes, there is a command, and that's for the future, and there are times when it's appropriate and times when it's not.
Right, but we assume Abraham knew the command came from Hashem. We never know if the circumstances are such that the command comes from Hashem. We can never know that. None of us have prophecy. We can never know.
No, I'm kidding.
Huh?
No,
Abraham knew the command came from Hashem. So I don't even begin to see how you can learn that from this.
So there are. So I will send you afterwards the midrashim that say that Abraham fundamentally misunderstood.
Are they suggesting that he didn't have prophecy, or he assumed
it? He missed it. For that, so I'm not sure if I'm speaking about it on Shabbos. I can't give it away now, right?
Okay.
But
We won't be there.
I'll send you anyone who wants. If I decide, I will send you a copy. But Ernest, you're set in. This was the command. He got it clearly, and he did what he was supposed to do. But then Hashem didn't let him do it. Right? Did Hashem change his mind? Was he fooling Abraham?
No, he was playing out a trial.
You have, I mean, maybe I'm totally
The trial only works if he kills him. If you really want to see, hold on. If you really want to see if he's going to do it, guess what? He's got to do it. The fact that he's up there doesn't mean he can take that knife and slit his kid's throat.
He got pretty close.
You know what they say, except for horseshoes and hand grenades, close ain't good enough. If he really wanted to see if Abraham would do it, should have let him do it. Should have killed him. I mean, that's the other side of this.
That's tough love.
Yeah, it's tough
No,
love.
that's very tough.
No, but you have different.
But it might be good enough to go that far. It might actually be good enough for him to go that far, and to go that far in the way he did it. It's not just going that far. The way he went about it. Cool.
What does that mean? The way he went about it.
The way he went about it. He didn't make a fuss about it. He didn't talk about it. You have that unbelievable.
Hold that thought for a moment.
Yeah, but Sarah got the message, and why didn't she? And she died because.
Okay, that's next week. You gotta come back next week, Linda.
I know.
That's next week. That's not this week.
Okay.
So again, I'm clearly not going to convince Ernest, but my job tonight is not to convince you, because it is a tough read, but it is a fascinating way to try and deal with the issue of how can this be commanded, especially if we're not going to kill Yitzchak. And there is, it might be the Netziv, but don't quote me on that because I didn't look it up because I really was focused on David Tzvi Hoffman, right? There's another twist on this approach, which is not that it's the command, but it's to provide solace for all the Jews whose children were killed over the years. But that's a harder. To me, I think that's a much harder kind of an approach, and I doubt even in the last 2 years the fact that Abram was commanded. I doubt that brings any solace to anyone who has lost a son in the war, or God forbid otherwise. I think that would be difficult. But here it's and I'm not even sure that halachically it even works, mind you. But that's how he reads it. It is a fundamentally different read. I think it's a fascinating read. And what drives him, right, is that question: how could God command it if he doesn't want it? That, right, Ernest, you have a problem in your approach, which is elsewhere in the Chumash. Elsewhere in the Chumash, it says, you can't kill your children, right? So how can God command it if elsewhere it says you can't do it, right? In your approach, how do you solve that? It's a good question.
Well, okay, when he says elsewhere in the Chumash, I'm not sure. Yeah. First of all, this is pre-Matan Torah.
Hold
Second,
on. So Avram might not have known, but God knew what was going in the Torah.
yeah, of course, but
Of course.
I said to you that it introduces it. It's a nisayon, and it says it's a nisayon.
No, but
once it's a
so again,
nisayon,
let me take.
The rules can be whatever God sets up the rules to be.
No, that's not fair. If it is in the Chumash that you do not kill your children, right? God does not want that. We don't do
Clearly,
it.
he doesn't want that. Nobody's suggesting he wants that.
No. So stop for 1 second. If in the Chumash it says we do not offer our children as sacrifices, that we don't think is God's whim at one moment. That is an eternal truth and an eternal law, right? And now you have God commanding something against his own Torah. That is not as simple. It is not so simple to just say God does whatever he wants. That's a cop-out answer. Right? I think that question is incredibly difficult to answer.
I agree. It is a difficult
And
question.
honestly, I don't know what the answer is. Right? Oh, at some level, I spoke about this like probably years and years ago, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right? Phrasing it as follows, right? Most answers either sacrifice God as being, cruel and whatever to save Abraham, or they sacrifice Abraham to save God, but somebody has to be wrong. Making Hashem wrong is extraordinarily difficult, right? Meaning Hashem proposing a test that is against his eternal Torah.
Okay.
That's hard.
We all know the outcome of Hashem's test. The outcome of Hashem's test is that the child is not sacrificed.
But
then
the test was a fool's errand to see if Abram would violate the Torah.
Well,
you're not going to get a smooth read your way, I promise.
If Hashem speaks to you and tells you to violate the Torah, what do you do?
Well, at that point, you should assume that you're a false prophet. You got it wrong. Right? Prophecy is not, aside from Moshe Rabbeinu, this is coming to Avram in a dream.
Actually, yeah, that's what the Rambam says, doesn't it? About identifying a false prophet.
The Chumash says that.
Chumash says that, yeah.
Chumash says that, right? Don't blame on the Rambam or the Rambam.
But this is pre-Matan Torah, so you don't have that. Yes, of course, God knows what is going to be in the Torah.
Yeah, but that's a cheating out. To say that this is before the Torah has no impact on God whatsoever. That's not a fair argument. Right? Because
he's saying Abraham.
No, again, so you want to say that Abraham didn't intuit what he wanted, but why is God asking Abraham to do something he knows is wrong? That God himself said is wrong. God can't change his mind.
Well, that is the whole problem. That's why you said it's the most difficult passage. That's why you said it's the most difficult passage of the Torah.
Yes, but that's the genius of this approach. And again, I'll say it again. I'm not telling you this is the best approach. I'm not telling you it's an easy approach to read into the Chumash. But the brilliance, the genius of it is he manages to save the command. He manages to save the divine command. Now, he has to take it from Avram's time and throw it in the future. But sadly, our history is full of those times.
So that command that you're not allowed to kill your children is subject now to there are times when you are. That's what he's saying.
Yes, which again,
now it is also extreme. That's extremely difficult too, isn't it? Because it doesn't say that.
Okay,
everything. So we're bringing this.
You are not going to find. I'm still looking, and I haven't found it. I've read 2 or 3 books on the Akedah, and I can't find a good answer.
Yeah,
you're not going to find an answer that nails everything. That's I think impossible.
Yeah.
Or it certainly is yet to be suggested. But what he has done is saying I can keep both commandments because as a general rule, as sacrifice to God, we don't want it. Are there times when it is okay or even a right thing to do? So he says from here we see yes. And he's living to right. When does Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman live? End of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century in Germany.
Mhm.
Until 1930s, Germany was a good place for Jews to be. He wasn't living under pogroms. He wasn't living with the Cossacks. He wasn't living the Khmelnytskys or the Crusaders or whatever, right? He was actually living at a pretty decent time to be a Jew in Germany. So, it's not even that like the historical circumstance made him say it. His historical circumstance was pretty decent.
Yeah.
And he died before it was bad. But he's struggling with this question.
Yeah.
Right? How could God command this? And this is his answer. Again, you can take it or leave it, but hopefully you understand now where he's coming from.
I think it's a super dangerous answer also because it opens a door which none of us are able to be on the level of judging whether we should go into that door, into that entrance or not.
Is
It's
that the
like
goal of subservience? I mean, is this like the ultimate subservience that we should all be like attempting?
No, and clearly not in this approach, right? In this approach, the primary is don't do it. But yeah, there are terrible times throughout history where people should know in that type of a unique and crazy situation, this is a possibility. He's not arguing for it. Now, Ernest is right. It's not, right, where do you draw the line? Right? Do you kill your kids so they don't become baptized and stolen by the convent jury? I don't know.
we need a Sanhedrin of 70 people to decide on the death penalty.
So
they do it once in 70 years, and there are bloody Sanhedrins.
It is a piece of Torah commentary. This is not a book of halacha.
No, I know, but it just doesn't fit to me.
We've noticed that. Ernest is not a fan. We could go on record. Ernest is not a fan. Do you at least recognize the brilliance of what he's trying to do?
You have something
creativity, I would say. I would call it more creativity than brilliance. I mean, it's not for me to say. He's obviously a brilliant man. That's not fair.
I think he's brilliantly solving the question that nobody else can solve. Now, he does it in a way which is difficult. But why does God command something usher in the Torah? That, in your approach, you have no answer for that.
No.
And he's found an answer for that. Like it or don't like it, that is, it makes it unique. Yes, you won't find this in many other places in any other commentary, which is why it's cool. I mean, I'm just, personally, right? When you find new and unique approaches, I think those are fascinating. We don't have to accept them as gospel, but the point is trying to understand where he's coming from, what he's trying to solve, and then you have an appreciation. Even if ultimately you decide it's not the direction in which you want to go, I think we should have that appreciation of.
We hold it out like as an example, like my understanding, and I could be wrong, like the Ben Sora Mora, like supposedly never happened and never will happen, correct?
So Ben Sora Umora, which is another of those very challenging, but it's less challenging because that's not so. Right, so the Ben Sora Umora, which is in Parshas Kitetse, all right. Maybe it's the 25th chapter of Devarim, somewhere in there, right? You have a gluttonous child that you kill, right? He's 12 and a half. He stole some meat, he drank some wine.
But we understand that it never happened and never will happen.
So that's an argument in the Gemara, but that is less challenging because it's not, for two reasons. One is it's not given as a specific command to a specific person, right? And then it becomes an intellectual exercise. Right, what Chazal did, I'll give you the 30-second version, right? So the Gemara simply says, right, their way of dealing with the difficulty is saying, never happened. Right? It's an interesting theory. It's a nice mitzvah, but it never happened. It was never meant to be practical. What Chazal did, which is even more fascinating, is Chazal, sensitive to your point, legislated Ben Sora Umora out of existence, right? V'kol aviv v'kol imo. I'm going to give you the example, because lest you think that that's insane, right? It says that he didn't listen to v'kol aviv v'kol imo, in his father's voice and his mother's voice, and then the Medrash says that that the father and the mother had to look identical and their voices had to be identical. Right? You don't even get that in the circus. Right? I mean, what? Right? So either Chazal are fools, which God forbid, right? We should say that. But what they're doing, and we should appreciate, is when Chazal write that, they're essentially saying this will never happen. Have you ever met anyone who looks identical to his wife or husband
Us.
and has the same voice?
No, but so I mean, if you take that,
Listen, I mean, it could be in the future. Who knows what they'll do? A little surgery and God knows what. But in that time, not really.
so you can't say that because God rescinded to some degree his command because he found it out. So it never happened. Can you just say it never did actually happen and never will happen?
You could, but then you're back to my question to Ernest, which is now to you, which is then why did God command it if it's not supposed to happen? Right, and that's a very difficult question. So Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman has an answer to that question. Like it or not like it, he has formulated an answer to the question, and that is the genius in his approach. And that took a little bit longer than I thought, but I do at least want to get to one more.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm happy to take any more thoughts or questions before I
have one side question.
Sure.
In Pasuk Hey, Abraham says, "Ani ba'anar nashuva alechem." So how do we reconcile Abraham saying that we will be returning if he was going to sacrifice his son? Pasuk Hey.
Oh, he was lying to them. Meaning he didn't want to give it away. So he just, a little fib. That's how you reconcile it.
That's getting
so that's the answer. He was
listen, he doesn't give it away. So if you're reading that literally, Sid,
yeah,
then Abram's in on the joke, as it were.
Correct.
Okay, but then the whole thing's a joke. Then it's not a test. No, then it's not a test. If Abram knows it's not going to happen, what's happening here? Right? Meaning, which is why I said it's a little fib, because that is why to get all the details right in this story, as Sid has just beautifully illustrated, to get all the details right and get a comprehensive picture where everything fits textually and theologically, at 120, we can ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the answer. Nobody has come up with that yet.
Maybe it shows a perfect example of mutual trust, where maybe it shows that Abraham knew Hashem better than anyone else, and maybe he really did understand.
So let me use that as a
segue.
As a segue to where is Vayihi Bayom? Here, Pasuk Gimel, like Dalet. By Yom HaShlishi, right, on the third day, by Abram etenav, Abram looks up, Vayar et hamakom rachot. Right. What was he doing for those 3 days? That's a fair question. So he actually says something that, and I probably shared this in shul, but I heard from Abamital many, many times, over the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur's Parshios, when we did the Akedah, right? He says that those 3 days were time to struggle with himself, to argue with God, to beg God to intercede, to stop, to not do this. And he thinks that's why it was, by Yom HaShlishi, he believes is highlighting, you have 3 days to wrestle with this. In a different language, Rav Amital used to tell us, anyone who thinks that Abram didn't ask God and plead and beg with God is not a Jew. That's what he used to tell us. So it can't be. So that is point number 2. I'm just going to give you one more point, and then I'm happy to take any questions. He highlights something which is fascinating, right? If you look at Pasuk Yud, right? 10 Vayishlach Abraham et Yado. So Abraham puts out his hand. Vayikach et hamalchel l'shchol et beno. He takes the right, the knife, this whatever it is, to slaughter his son. Vayikra elav malach Hashem min hashamayim, right? The angel of God calls out to him from heaven, and again, Vayomer Abraham, right? Vayomer Hineni, he says, "Don't do it," and then he says, right? Ki ata yadati ki yirei Elohim ata. I know that you are fearing God. And what David Tzvi Hoffman points out, he's certainly not the first one. Turn back to Pasuk Aleph, right? Turn back to the first Pasuk and tell me which name of God is used to offer the command.
Elohim.
Right? Vayhi achar hadvarim ha'ela v'Elohim nisa et Avraham. Right? And then again in Pasuk Gimel, Vayelech el hamakom asher amar lo ha'Elohim. In Pasuk Tet, Vayavo el hamakom asher amar lo ha'Elohim. Right? And then, so the command and the beginning of the fulfillment of the command is all done with the name of Elohim. And when the angel comes to stop Abraham, it is with Shem Hashem. What does that mean? Right? What does Shem Hashem versus Shem Elohim generally connote?
Rachamim against.
Right, Rachamim. So it's a brilliant use of the different names of Hashem. Right now, that suggests, although he doesn't flesh it out, he just notes it and goes on. Right, that would almost suggest a different approach. That is, the midas hadin, with a strict judgment, justice attribute. This should be commanded and demanded of Abraham, but it was God's mercy that allowed him to stop it. But that's a whole different approach, which he doesn't tie back into his other approach. So I don't know what he does with it, but it is noteworthy, and anyone studying the Akedah should note that the command is given b'Shem Elohim, and the cessation, the stopping, is actually given b'Shem Hashem.
Because it says Malach Hashem, is that what he's referring to?
Yeah, but it doesn't say Malach Elohim.
Yeah.
Which it should. Everything until this point was Elohim, Elohim, Elohim. And then he says, I see that you are Yirei Elohim. Right? And then, fascinating, if you want to continue this, although he doesn't point this out, but you might as well look for it. Take another minute, because why not? Look at Pasuk Yudalid. Vayikra Avraham Shem Hamakomahu Hashem Yireh Asher Yamar Hayom Behar Hashem Yireh. And then Vayikra Malach Hashem. Right, everything from the moment that we stop, right, the moment that the Akedah is stopped, it switches full shift to Shem Hashem, to Rachamim, to mercy. That's another direction to go. I'm not sure how that fleshes itself out, but it is in the text, and you can't ignore it. All right, I think with that we'll leave ourselves confused tonight.
Yeah, my usual state.
But hopefully with some appreciation, maybe I made a dent in earnest over the evening. Some appreciation for the approach of Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman. I'm happy to take any last questions, should anyone have them. Nobody dares. Okay, wish you a good night. Come back next week.
Thank you.
Inda Chaye Sarah and Sarah's death.
Thank you.
Next week.
Next week.
Next week. Take care, everybody.
Gator.